Hey everybody, welcome back to the Near Memo with Greg and Mike. Caught us mid-joke here. Mike was being very self-congratulatory about his appearance in this case, which is well-deserved.
And well preserved, as it were.
Well-deserved and preserved.
Yes.
Anyway, this is a no-nonsense edition of the Near Memo. We have to get a bunch of stuff in a short period of time. And, as always, we'll be talking about a range of things. We'll be talking about review extortion. We're going to talk about a new feature in Google Maps for mobile, an augmented reality feature. We'll be talking about what are the sort of deficiencies of ChatGPT's local experience, which is sort of a theme that I've been on for a while. And then finally, we're going to be talking about YouTube as a kind of a mega strategic asset for Google and what it means in the AI era. So, Mike.
Sure. So we've been talking about the review extortion over the past several weeks. There's a new article at Near Media that details it. The New York Times a couple of weeks ago said that this was a new thing that small businesses had to worry about, which it sort of stuck in my craw. And I went to do the research. I looked into the Google Business Profile forums and tabulated the accounts of review extortion over the past 4 or 5 years. As you can see that from this chart that I'm showing, prior to 2023, there was very little in aggregate. There's one line for all the previous years. 2023, 2024, there was fairly low levels of this reported in the forum, but it was coming from the Google communication, the messaging system that Google had built into the GBP. It isn't a new threat. This threat has been there. They were using to communicate, the spammers were using Google's communication tools to affect the threat. But in late January, I think it was the 22nd of January, they announced the rollout of late last year, they announced the deprecation of the messaging system. And then in January, they rolled out an alternative messaging for GBP, which was SMS and WhatsApp. They did it at the end of January. You can see very quickly after that in this chart, starting in March, April, May, June, dramatic increase in the number of reports in the forums about this form of extortion, where a spammer would send you a WhatsApp, say that a competitor asked me to leave you bad reviews, but if you pay me, I won't do it. Person says, well, great, don't do it. And then if they don't pay, then they get 10 or 20 fake reviews. Google claims they're going to be creating a form. I doubt it. This is sort of typical Google, happy talk. But you can see that the problem in the forum has gotten much more common, and largely as a result of integrating WhatsApp. So just wanted to update that sort of ongoing report.
Well, my question is, what is a craw? You said it's stuck in your craw. What formally is a craw?
That's what a chicken, where it's,
The skin flap underneath the chicken's.
Yeah, where they do some of their digestion with the rocks. That sort of sits there and then gets digested with the rocks and then goes to their stomach. That's a craw.
Stuck in the craw expression.
Stuck in the craw, yeah. I don't know. That's an interesting turn of phrase, right? You'd never heard it, I guess. The other
No. I have heard the phrase, but it, like so many phrases, idiomatic expressions. No, I didn't know the origin or what it literally meant. Anyway, all right. Well, so obviously this is a big problem, and as you say,
Google has not put in place adequate safeguards or after the fact ability for businesses to solve it. That's the biggest problem.
And your article does talk about how you can minimize. You can't completely eliminate the risk, but you can minimize the risk chiefly by eliminating WhatsApp as a communication channel on your GBP.
Yes, and if it happens to you, I detail the steps you need to take to get them taken down.
All right, so that's an article on nearmedia.co. Now, item number 2, Google Maps augmented reality.
So they gave local guides early access to an experiment called See It, Snap It, Ask It, where when you click on the lens feature inside of Google Maps on mobile, you are able to then audibly ask questions about what's visible in the scene. And so it's a very slick, lightweight AR augmentation that works very well. You went out on the street earlier, pointed at a few things, that automatically recognizes things in the view, and you can ask it questions about the history of it, the development of it. It's quite slick. It's a test. I don't know if it's gonna or when it's gonna roll out, but I just thought it was a very interesting little AR tool that is it's nice. It's unlike many Google things that they're testing. It's not slow. It's not annoying. It doesn't get in the way. It's very easy to use and useful, particularly if you're traveling and are not familiar with an area.
Well, what's interesting is that let's say this is a version of augmented reality with with AI sort of in the background. Augmented reality and different people trying to realize its potential and create apps and products around it has been around for like quite a long time. I mean, I think there were quote unquote augmented reality browsers, and at one point Yelp tried augmented reality in its app, which was a sort of a terrible experience. But that's way back in like 2007, 2008, maybe even earlier, like 16, 17 years ago. And we're now just seeing this kind of come to fruition. And there was
And what
also
makes it useful is the backend AI backend that can
Mhm.
answer any question you might ask. It's not limited to a knowledge graph. So I think that's really what makes this fast and efficient, and Google's speed at delivering that answer is impressive.
You pointed me to an article, I think that was about audio augmented reality with AirPods,
Yes.
and how AirPods can potentially do the same thing. I mean, it's based on data and location awareness, but that's also a very interesting scenario where you could be walking down the street and ask a question about, a building and an address, or even just look at it and get some location awareness. I think that's very
Apple is
interesting.
currently doing that, just as a note. Like, I ride my bike and wear my earbuds when I'm riding my bike, sometimes in transparency mode, just for people who are worried about my safety. But you can ask it a question: what are some lunch places nearby? And it will say, I found three. The first one is this. It'll actually do this in the earbuds. And you can shake your head yes if you want that one, or no if you don't. It'll go on to the next one. So Google is, or Apple rather, I'm sorry, has started to implement some of these things in the earbuds. And we're starting to get a glimpse of that.
Yes, and I think that's very, very interesting that this is all starting to sort of show up in a more serious way or more meaningful way. Okay, so let's move on to an
That we're seeing it in the translation features as well
yes, yes, certainly
in both Google and Apple.
right. The Apple announcement for AirPods 3.0, and I guess it's grandfathered through a software update to the earlier version, which I haven't yet received, is this kind of real-time translation feature, which is very impressive. I mean, Google has demoed that in the past, which, at one point in one of the IOs, Google I/O developer conferences, they demoed some real-time translation feature
And I think it's been on some of the
and it was
Pixels.
vaporware. It was total vaporware at the time, and it never sort of came to pass. And, now it is. But go ahead.
Well, I think it's been on a couple of recent Pixels. It's not clear to me how effective it is, but we'll see. It's
Well,
just an
that's
interest. It just, I mean, the article I sent you pointed out that that earbuds sit as an interface between you and the internet, between your brain and the internet, and anything that does that at the
right.
scale that AirPods do it has a lot of potential to have an impact on going forward in terms of user behaviors. And I think,
Right. I mean, and that's the advantage, obviously, that Google and Apple have is this massive, massive installed base with these
yes.
platforms. And I think it also points to something interesting about kind of the next computing wave or device or platform. As Meta rolled out its latest smart glasses, they talk about Mark Zuckerberg's sort of vendetta against Apple because he's, resentful that he doesn't have a platform to control. And so he's trying to make smart glasses the next platform and kill the smartphone. And I think you're not going to have that, right? What you have are different wearables, watches, earbuds, the smartphone, and smart glasses that will all deliver some version of an internet experience, many of them now with some situational or location awareness and augmented reality, with AI as the sort of machine in the background to deliver the information. And I don't think we'll see everybody wearing smart glasses or everybody using AirPods or everybody using a watch or some, OpenAI is in theory with Johnny Ive is supposed to be developing some pendant or something that hangs around your neck. And, when the magic word is mentioned, you'll turn into a mindless automaton and then do their bidding.
Right. the real threat of AI taking over. This is a tiny, if you can't see this on the podcast, but this is a tiny violin, and I'm playing it for poor Mark Zuckerberg, who has been so disadvantaged by competitors that he's on a vendetta. Hard way to win a race, by being in
Well,
the
I don't think
vengeance
that's
mode.
I don't think that's exclusively the case,
I don't think it's exclusively the case either, but I do
but it's
believe that
definitely there.
it plays a role in his sort of worldview, which I see as quite distorted.
Well, now Trump is now his mentor, and so that makes a certain amount of sense. All right. So moving on, moving on. I was at, okay, let me get it up here. You can see my screen, hopefully.
Yes, we
I
can.
I was at Brighton SEO this week. My first trip there. Saw a lot of people I haven't seen in years, which was really fun. And some people that we'll probably be having on the podcast in the future. And one of the reasons I was there was to present some research that we had done for Last Mile Retail. And Last Mile Retail is a company that does listings management and a bunch of other things that a lot of companies do. But they also manage local product inventory, and so that's their kind of unique angle, and syndicate that in various places. And the survey that we did was really asking about how people are using AI in local search and local product search. So there were questions about sort of services and questions about products. The story in the market that's, I mean, I've gone on about this in the past. The story in the market that was originally told, from 2022 to early 2024, when Gartner put out their, 25-30% of search will be cannibalized by AI, or ChatGPT will take it away. That story is Google is being disrupted. And then Rand Fishkin and Datos and SEMrush come along with their clickstream data, and they say, look at the search volumes and look at the user numbers. There's no impact here at all. Google is not being disrupted. In fact, they're stronger than ever. And neither of those is entirely true. The the first one, Google is toast, is less true than the Google has weathered the storm and seems to be doing fine. But there's in the weeds, this varies by vertical. You do see an impact on user behavior, and you do see an interesting way in which AI and Google are being used in a kind of complementary or sequential way. But the point of this slide answers the question. So we asked them, do you use what percentage of your search activity is local, has local intent, and how often are you doing this, and have you used AI for local search? And 57% of the respondents said they had, and many of them multiple times. I think that was the number, actually. 57%. I think it was a bigger number that had used it for local search, but 57% had done multiple local searches. Problem for people, 68% of people express some level of dissatisfaction with the AI results, chiefly ChatGPT. And the problem is that there's missing information. And we asked them, well, what kinds of information do you feel is not there that you would like to see? And this is a representation of many of those things. So
So what's
store
on
inventory.
screen is a chart showing
Yes.
the 7 or 8 things that people find missing in some significant quantity. Sorry.
Yeah, chiefly in ChatGPT when people are doing local searches. And among these, thank you for doing that, because I lose consciousness of people just listening without watching. Among these things are store inventory, which Google has some of, but not a ton, store specific promotions, detailed information about services, store hours, directions and parking information, reviews, local events. There's a range of things. And most of these are present in Google's local graph, or GBP, or local results. And people have been conditioned by Google to expect certain kinds of information.
And recently you highlighted in your newsletter Matt McGee noting that Google Maps weren't showing up in ChatGPT either. In addition to these sort of deeper, more granular things, the primary interface that people have come to expect in local seems to be missing in action in ChatGPT of late.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of the things that's kind of interesting and sort of maddening about AI, the UI UX, is the sort of variability of it, the kind of unpredictability of it to some degree. You get different user experiences for different kinds of questions. But the larger point is that Google has conditioned everybody to expect certain kinds of information, especially in a local context. And ChatGPT really has a dilemma. Do we invest? Do we try and develop this information? Do we try and bring it in and not mimic Google, but give people some of these things that they feel are not there? Because I've now asked in multiple surveys, well, if you don't find the information you're looking for, what do you do? And people go to Google. They go from a sort of a discovery experience on ChatGPT to a transactional or lower funnel experience on Google. And 50% of the users, we asked them again, sort of, what has been the impact of AI on your Google usage? And there are several groups, no impact at all. I use Google more, I use Google less. And the striking thing in this particular survey was about half of the users, and this is a survey of over 1,000 adults, half of the people said, I'm using Google and ChatGPT or Google and AI, could be Gemini, roughly equally. So people see value in the AI experience, but they're not being able to get all their needs met. And so they sort of use Google as it's like burger and fries. The burger without the fries is incomplete, and certainly the fries without, you can eat fries without a burger, but it's harder to eat burger without that's a bad analogy, but you get the metaphor.
The other problem I see with it recently with ChatGPT 5 is the incredible slowness of it compared to Google. I put a question just before we started into ChatGPT and Notebook LM, Google's sort of research tool. And Notebook LM was just immediate. And it literally took 3 minutes to get an answer, or 4 minutes to get an answer out of ChatGPT.
Right.
And that's a problem, I think. People have become acclimatized to Google's standard for speed, which is
I
nearly instant.
I totally agree. I mean, Gemini's speed has gotten faster, and
ChatGPT seems to have gotten slower.
ChatGPT has to figure out which tool in the background to use, and so it has slowed down in some instances, and I do think that depends on what you're doing, but I do think that that's problematic. And it's probably costly for them to speed it up. I mean, I think, there've been people who made observations recently that they're doing things to potentially save money, maybe reducing the instances of search for free users and other things. And that's not a good sign for them because they need to really be aggressive. They're entering, I think 2026 will be a really pivotal year for consumer behavior around AI. The market is maturing, people are picking their use cases, and if ChatGPT falls behind and Google continues to aggressively push Gemini on all its channels and surfaces, Google could really consolidate an advantage there, which they seem to be on the cusp of doing anyway. And speaking of Google, let's talk about YouTube.
So I have been dancing around my explanation of YouTube's role in Google's sort of world for the past several months here and thinking about it a lot. But I just recently read an article by Ben Thompson at Stratechery called The YouTube Tip of the Google Spear, which I thought articulated this better than anything I had ever thought of or anything I had ever said. And I just thought it was a really good summary of YouTube and versus LLMs and the text-based model. But he pointed out that, these text-based models came on the scene in 2022 from ChatGPT with a huge thunder and
Text-based AI.
text-based AI and people sort of said, gee, it's ChatGPT's game and Claude from Anthropic's game to lose. But what a lot of people who are in my position and like me didn't fully articulate or think about it. I know you're a little more tuned to video than I am, but basically consumers have largely spoken that they prefer video to text. They prefer watching things on TikTok or YouTube rather than reading them. And we can see that in the growth of Instagram and TikTok and YouTube. And YouTube over this time frame has become an incredibly dominant platform. In fact, it's now the number one streaming service in the living room, even more viewed than Netflix. I mean, that's just
And it's the number one podcast channel as well.
channel. And that's just that. Those are just two segments of its exposure, right? Mobile phone and tablets and so on. And the YouTube has created this massive economy where they're paying $100 billion to creators over the last 4 years. And so TikTok stars aspire to become YouTube creators because they actually can make money at it. And so he points out that AI in the context of YouTube is a sustaining innovation as opposed to a threat. In case of search was threatened by text AI of ChatGPT and had to respond aggressively and assertively and try to reposition itself and say, we can do the same thing. We saw those early steps from Google as very, awkward and sort of caught off guard. Whereas with AI, it really sustains their effort. They have a huge resource video. They have a huge resource that they can use to train the videos, which nobody else has. They have the ability, a huge platform to deliver it, and they deliver it free, which nobody else at huge volumes, which nobody else can afford to do. And more importantly, they've developed a number of video tools from that, VO3, which allows YouTube creators to automatically create new videos. And apparently it allows Google to analyze a video and identify items in the video in real time to make them available for purchase or for showing an ad or whatever, which gives them a huge opportunity.
If I'm demonstrating a coffee grinder, for example, that could show up as a link or something.
Yes. YouTube
or an image.
And exactly. So he's pointing out that while Google may experience some threat in text-based world of search, may be disrupted, maybe not, as we talked about in the last segment. In video, they have a clear lead with clear moat and clear technical advantages in terms of utilization and monetization. And when you look at the growth patterns of the two, which is 200 billion in revenue. YouTube is 36 billion in revenue, but YouTube is growing more quickly and search is under more, well, it's substantially larger. It's under more threats than YouTube. To some extent, so this raises a whole raft of questions. I mean, one is Google willing to sort of make search sort of the sacrificial lamb at some level? In other words, they're willing to let the government, or they're going to give some things to the government in terms of the antitrust stuff. They're going to shitify it more to extract more money and maybe drive usage down because it isn't as strategic. That's one question. Obviously, they're at risk of being disrupted. But the other questions it raises is, can YouTube replace search on the local front as a discovery tool? There's some research, some surveys from BrightLocal that indicates that, I think in their review, local search consumer behavior studies and online review trends from the last 3 or 4 years they've done, indicated that YouTube has as much place in local discovery and information discovery of local businesses as the local news, and it's ahead of Instagram and TikTok. It's like 35%. So it is being used for that.
And it's also a platform that young people use, whereas, young people have to some degree shunned traditional Google in favor of these other platforms for various reasons, which we don't need to get into.
But that trend of the younger users using it now means that 10 years from now, when they're the dominant purchase group, that trend will continue to accelerate as people like me sort of drop off the back end of the Google search utilization.
You're not trying to have your brain implanted into a humanoid robot?
I think the world deserves better than that.
All right. Well, so I agree with you that YouTube is a tremendous asset for Google, and there isn't, TikTok and Instagram have video, but there is no other sort of single competitor that is operating at that level of scale. I don't think it is a substitute for search in all cases. I think it's an excellent resource in selected cases. I don't think you're going to want to see, if you're trying to get efficient information, YouTube is not the way to do it. in many instances, because you have to sit through the stupid ads to get to the content, to determine that the content is lousy, to then move on to the next video and repeat the process. YouTube Shorts might be a much more effective substitute in some cases because they're more compact.
And one of the things we talked about at our office hours, which is a unique opportunity for our paying members to get together once a month and discuss in great detail
It's
things that are
really a
going on.
therapy session more than
Oh,
anything
yeah.
else.
Yes. But one of the things that came up was just the idea of the full funnel search experience that
Right.
I articulated that both ChatGPT and Google are both striving for, where somebody starts with a vague idea and then narrows down to actually where they're going to buy it locally. And I think in that context of an integrated search engine that takes that full funnel approach, but integrates local graph and video and text into a full funnel experience, and would be very powerful at that. And
Yes.
who better to do that than our favorite monopolist?
Yes. Nobody else really can do what you've described because they don't have all the assets. I mean, the local graph, the video, search, not even ChatGPT, and especially not ChatGPT if they can't get the bottom of the funnel right, which is what I was just talking about a few minutes ago. But one of the interesting things to contemplate, and this is central to Google's whole sort of mindset about AI and what search results look like, is that sort of faceted or full funnel experience that takes you from, I have a problem, here's a product or service to address it, where can I buy that, or who do you recommend for me to contact to address that? Google is the only one in the position to do that, but they can't, I don't believe they can monetize that experience equally to what they are doing in their current serve, because the monetization that they currently do requires to some degree uncertainty and inefficiency. I don't know what I want. I have to search and refine, and then I search again, and then I get all these different ad exposures throughout the process. With an AI experience, you can ask these follow-up questions, which don't necessarily produce, I mean, they do produce different information, and they could show ads at each step, but I think it's a much more efficient way to get to the bottom of the funnel. And I think there are only going to be a few ad impressions that you can deliver, and certainly clicks. If clicks is the currency, people aren't going to be clicking on 15 different ads in that process. They're going to look at things and they might click on one or two things, especially if they can play in line in the case of video, but they're really going to sort of get to the bottom and maybe they click on an ad there.
Well, I agree with that there are going to be perhaps fewer opportunities, although Google's quite good at sneaking these in. I would posit as an alternative view for the success of this local service ads. Google has quite
Yes.
carefully and religiously determined what users need and want so that they deliver that in the form of a local service ad. And it's quite compelling. Even people who say they're ad skeptics frequently go back to it.
Yes, of
And I've
course.
done some research in the legal space looking at employment law and personal injury. And these local service ad can run upwards of $500 for an interaction in PI in Los Angeles. $500. That's not a inexpensive
Per click,
per
per
interaction,
lead,
whatever it
per
is. Could be
lead,
per
per
lead,
lead.
right? Per call,
Yeah.
per lead. And they're now adding that ability to contact 4 lawyers simultaneously, and they are
Yeah,
totally non-transparent how much they're
yeah,
going to charge for that ad. Is it 1/4 of the
yeah.
500? No way. And so
Well,
it's some high percentage of the 500. So they get 4 payments for this, and you
yeah.
can't dispute it. So they have figured out ways to monetize the lower
they're
volume
getting more blood out of
clicks.
the rock. Yeah.
They are
I
getting
mean,
significantly more blood out of the rock. But they
well,
don't see it
so
as a rock. They see it as somebody who needs a lead.
they see it as a pot of gold that they can continue to go back to again and again. But just real quickly before we end on that legal example and this full funnel experience. So let's say there's a tree that sits in some neutral place between your yard and your neighbor's yard, and the tree provides shade and privacy and is quite an old tree or what have you. And the neighbor who's the new neighbor who comes in and is remodeling the house next door to you has a worker cut down that tree because they think it's on their property mistakenly. So you do your
Are we
research
are
on
we
what.
experiencing a little bit of your real life, Greg, in this
This is not my
hypothetical
life. This is
scenario?
not my life.
Oh, okay.
This is a real scenario for a friend. This is not my
Okay.
life. So that
You're asking
person,
for a friend. Okay.
yeah, just asking for a friend. No, this is truly not my life.
Okay.
So you're not a lawyer. You don't know what your recourse is. You don't know what your rights are. So you go into the AI experience and you describe this scenario, and then it starts asking you questions or giving you possibilities. And it eventually says, well, you may have some legal rights here. And then at the bottom of that is, would you like a referral to a local attorney who specializes in these kinds of disputes? And you say yes. And that's where you're going to see the LSAs show up. And somebody will click one of those. And then Google, of course, send out the multiple leads to the competitors. But there's not going to be ads throughout that process. It's like my neighbors cut down my tree. You're not going to see some ad for tree trimming or an arborist at the top of that. It's only going to show up when you're at a place near the bottom of the funnel. So it's just not going to be as lucrative for them.
Hard to know. I mean, do you click? I mean, if you're far up the funnel and don't have not identified your need yet, are you going to be clicking on ads? I don't know. I'm not sure.
No,
I
well,
never click on them, so I'm an ad
and
skeptic. But
and this doesn't
hard for
even
me to
to
say.
take into account. Sorry, this doesn't even take into account the hypothetical agentic scenario of the future where you just say, here's a bunch of requirements, or here's my problem, hey, go solve it for me. So
One of the
that's
things that
another.
Google said, though, was that these leads are more likely to close. They're better qualified. And if we're getting $500 a lead out of 4 clicks for a quote, then maybe they could get $1,000 out of it
One click essentially
times
times four.
4. But
Yeah.
if they could get $1,000 out of it because the lead is so much better, they will. I see it as a relatively zero-sum game here. And I think that if the quality of ads improve, if the quality of the search experience improves, I think Google can make as
Well,
much
those
or perhaps more.
maybe.
But
I mean, those people will certainly
I'm
be
not that
more
worried about them. Just saying. It's
Yeah.
like it's not what I lose sleep over at night. Is their income?
Those people at the bottom of the funnel are going to be more qualified than your random searcher. But we're out of time, and we've covered a lot of ground. We didn't cover everything, obviously, and we will. We'll be back next week with more information. I don't know if we have a guest next week. I forget. I think we do. But anyway, more guests, more ranting and venting when we return. And thank you as always for listening. Tell your friends, and think about subscribing to the newsletter. And we'll see you next time.